Oliver Cromwell, born on the 25th of April 1599, has always been debatably regarded as a military dictator of his time, including Winston Churchill himself, due to his controversial use of the army to acquire political power and the brutality of his 1649 campaign in Ireland. He was an English statesman, politician, and soldier, widely regarded as one of the most important figures in the history of the British Isles, due to his prominence during the 1639 to 1653 British Civil Wars, initially as a senior commander in the Parliamentarian army and latterly as a politician. But how did Cromwell end up with much higher power and importance among his fellow Englishmen? Not forgetting the fact that, at the time, England was under the leadership of a monarchy. Cromwell was born in Huntingdon to Robert Cromwell and his second wife, Elizabeth. Cromwell's paternal grandfather, Sir Henry Williams, was one of the two wealthiest landowners in Huntingdonshire. Despite being part of the landed gentry, Cromwell's father had modest means, and, as a younger son among many siblings, inherited only a house in Huntingdon and a small amount of land. This land provided an income at the lower end of the gentry scale, leading to Oliver Cromwell's famous remark, "I was by birth a gentleman, living neither in considerable height nor yet in obscurity." Like most children born in the country then, Cromwell was baptized in the Church of England. At 21, he married Elizabeth Bourchier, the daughter of a wealthy merchant family active in the Puritan Church. This connection likely influenced Cromwell's decision to join the Puritan sect in the 1630s. In 1628, Cromwell was elected to Parliament, representing Huntingdon. Later that year, he sought treatment for various physical and emotional ailments, including depression. In 1629, he became embroiled in a dispute with local officials, which led to him being summoned before the Privy Council in 1630. As a probable consequence of this dispute, Cromwell sold most of his properties in Huntingdon in 1631 and moved to a farmstead nearby St. Ives. This move marked a step down in social status for the Cromwells, significantly impacting Cromwell emotionally and spiritually. A surviving letter from 1638 to his cousin details his spiritual awakening during this period. In it, Cromwell, referring to himself as the chief of sinners, expresses his belief that God's mercy saved him from his past sins. The letter also reflects his independent religious beliefs, emphasizing that the Reformation had not gone far enough, much of England still lived in sin, and that Catholic practices must be fully eradicated from the Church. Cromwell served as the Member of Parliament for Huntingdon from 1628 to 1629. However, King Charles III suspended Parliament, leading to 11 years of personal rule without a legislative body. When Charles faced the Scottish Rebellion during the Bishops' Wars, the lack of funds forced him to reconvene Parliament in 1640. Cromwell was elected to this Parliament as the member for Cambridge, but it lasted only 3 weeks, becoming known as the Short Parliament. Later in 1640, a second Parliament was called, known as the Long Parliament. During its first 2 years, Cromwell allied with a group of devout aristocrats in the House of Lords and members of the House of Commons, with whom he had established familial and religious ties in the 1630s, such as the Earls of Essex, Warwick, and Bedford. Although Charles thus reconvened Parliament, his rule remained unstable. In 1642, armed conflict broke out between Parliament's forces, the New Model Army, and those loyal to the monarchy, marking the start of the English Civil War. During this time, Cromwell's military career began to emerge. His divergent religious views from those of Charles I also fueled the conflict. Despite having no formal military training, Cromwell quickly distinguished himself on the battlefield, recruiting and leading troops to key victories in 1642 at the Battle of Edgehill and in East Anglia. By 1644, he had risen to the rank of lieutenant general. In 1645, he played a crucial role in the parliamentarian victories at the Battle of Naseby and the Battle of Langport. In October 1645, Cromwell led an assault on the Catholic fortress Basinghouse and was later accused of killing 100 men after they had surrendered. Charles thus ultimately surrendered to the Scots in 1646, ending the First English Civil War. Cromwell was one of the lead negotiators for the parliamentarians in their attempts to settle with the royalists loyal to the monarch. However, these efforts failed, leading to the outbreak of the Second English Civil War when the king tried to regain power by force. Cromwell then marched north to confront a pro-royalist Scottish army known as the Engagers, who had invaded England. At Preston, in sole command for the first time and leading an army of 9,000, he secured a decisive victory against an army twice its size. In 1648, Cromwell's letters and speeches began to heavily incorporate biblical imagery, reflecting his meditations on particular passages. This suggests that it was Cromwell's faith, rather than a commitment to radical politics, that influenced him. Parliament's decision to negotiate with the king at the Treaty of Newport convinced him that God had spoken against both the king and Parliament as lawful authorities. For Cromwell, the army had become God's chosen instrument, and he firmly believed in providentialism, interpreting victories as signs of God's approval and defeats as indications that God was guiding him elsewhere. After returning to London, Cromwell became a staunch supporter of those advocating for the king's trial and execution, believing that killing Charles was the only way to end the civil wars. The death warrant for Charles was signed by 59 members of the court, including Cromwell. Although not unprecedented, the execution of a king, or regicide, was highly controversial, particularly given the doctrine of the divine right of kings. Charles I was executed on the 30th of January, 1649. After the king's execution, a republic was declared, known as the Commonwealth of England. The Rump Parliament held both executive and legislative powers, with a smaller Council of State also having some executive functions. Meanwhile, the Royalists had regrouped in Ireland, having signed a treaty with the Irish Confederate Catholics. In March, the Rump Parliament chose Cromwell to lead a campaign against them. Cromwell led the invasion of Ireland, landing in Dublin on August 15, 1649, and quickly capturing the ports of Drogheda and Wexford. At Drogheda, Cromwell's forces killed around 3,500 people, including 2,700 Royalist soldiers and hundreds of civilians and Catholic priests. Cromwell's hostility toward the Irish was both religious and political. He vehemently opposed the Catholic Church, which he viewed as denying the primacy of the Bible in favor of papal and clerical authority, and blamed for the persecution of Protestants in continental Europe. Cromwell left Ireland in May 1650, and several months later invaded Scotland after the Scots proclaimed Charles I's son, Charles II, as king. He showed much less hostility toward the Scottish Presbyterians, some of whom had been his allies during the First English Civil War, compared to the Irish Catholics. Following a decisive victory at the Scottish city of Dundee, which led to the Scots' defeat, the English Parliament was reformed in 1651. Cromwell, now notorious for his authoritarian rule, pushed for new elections and the establishment of a unified government over England, Scotland, and Ireland. When faced with opposition, Cromwell forcibly disbanded Parliament. Several months later, after various attempts to establish a government, John Lambert, a key parliamentary general during the English Civil Wars, drafted a new constitution, effectively making Cromwell Lord Protector for life on December 16, 1653. While Cromwell's power over England was undeniably rooted in his military career, whether he was a dictator remains debatable. Some might call him a theocratic military dictator, given his forcible disbandment of Parliament. However, he also attempted to transfer power to various governing bodies, which either failed or sought to dominate the country. Parliament repeatedly tried to persuade Cromwell to accept the crown, but he consistently refused until all other options were exhausted, even reshuffling Parliament twice. But hey, please give us your opinion on the subject. Could Cromwell truthfully be called a dictator? Please leave a comment, like, and subscribe.